Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Midnight, Let There Be Witchery, out March 4th on Metal Blade Records. The album has 10 tracks, 35 minutes in length, and this is the band's 5th full-length studio album. They are an American black speed metal band. Now this album, at first glance, it rips. It comes at you with a ton of speed and darkness, and that is the DNA of the band. Nothing new there. The only thing that I felt like it changed is that this album gives you two different perceptions depending on how you decide to interact with it. If you go from the first to the last song and you're just casually listening to this record, you're definitely overwhelmed by the speed and darkness that it has, and becomes the calling card, it becomes the DNA, it becomes everything that this album is all about. And when you look at 10 songs, 35 minutes, it all plays towards those cards. It all gives you that sensation that the album just kind of blew by. It just had all of this momentum to it, and you got caught in that momentum, and next thing you know, the album is done. But if you decide to break down each and every single song and take perhaps a little bit more time with the individual tracks and not necessarily get lost in the haze that the album creates as a whole, you start to see the differences. You start to see the ebbs and flows that exist within this record. Songs that lose a little bit of momentum, that lose a little bit of speed, gaining a little bit more thickness, gaining some more heaviness, becoming more methodic, and all of these tracks allow the album to have these ripples, these ups and downs movements that are really important in order for the experience of the listener to be better, in order for the experience to be more engaging, in order for the playability to increase. You don't realize this at first glance, but if the album didn't have this sort of movement, if the album didn't have this sort of pattern, it would become very monotonous, because the first song would sound exactly like everything else that comes right after. And the album, while giving you a little bit of that sensation, it's not quite true, because the songs are very different from track to track. So I really love this design, I really love this construction, because it increases the playability of the record. It makes the album feel better, sound better, have a much larger impact on the listener. Now, as far as soundscape is concerned, the record stays close to home. I mean, you can't come into a Midnight record expecting anything else but what they're gonna deliver album in and album out. I saw the other day somebody comparing Midnight to a merger of Motorhead and Venom, and that's exactly what this album is all about, is the birth child of Venom and Motorhead. You get a little bit of both. You get darkness, you get speed, you get this dirt, this grime that exists in the sound that really permeates extremely well across every single track, regardless of how fast or slow they're moving. It's an album that has a very good sound experience, and a sound experience that could be easily broken down into two different elements that have separate attributes that make the album overall feel very robust, and that is the drums and the guitars. The drums sound a lot cleaner, they sound a lot warmer, more polished, better defined, and it's really interesting because when you're listening to them, they really ground the album, they really create this bass line that feels so constant that it almost doesn't move, that gives a sense of consistency to the overall soundscape. Then on top of that, you have the guitars, and they're so grimy, they're so dirty, they're thick, they're heavy, they're driven. The riffage is phenomenal, and they're just all over the place. It's controlled chaos driving down this avenue, the avenue that's been created and constantly created by the drums. So these two elements feel so different, worlds apart in terms of how they sound and the impact that they're having on these songs. But when you put them together, they intertwine perfectly. They come together, they merge as one another, and the cleanliness of the drums, the warmth that comes out of the drums helps fade out some of the imperfections that exist on the guitar side, and then on the guitar side, the dirtiness, the grime that the guitars have permeate throughout, covering some of the cleanliness and how polished the drums are. Incredible how these two worlds, while being very different from one another, are not only able to coexist, but they're able to merge, and that is what's going to create the soundscape on this album from the first all the way to the last song. Vocally, the album is super consistent. What you get in the first song is going to be what you're going to get all the way through. There are some deviations when it comes to tonality as you move from the verses into the chorus, but that's to be expected because you want those choruses to be hookier, to be catchier, and you have to change ever so slightly how you're going to pronounce these words and how you're going to affect the lyrical content of the tracks themselves. There's also some backing vocals here and there throughout the album. They help create some substance, they help create some bigger experience, but not necessarily changing the DNA vocally of what this record is all about. And it's a record that, as you would expect from Midnight, the vocals always feel like they're coming and they're ripping through the track, that they're pushing through that darkness with equivalent speed as the speed of the tracks themselves. So they're always pairing up perfectly, allowing everything to come together in a perfect picture. All around, this is a very strong album. In my opinion, is a lot more complete than its predecessor. Not that I didn't like the predecessor, I loved it, but I really feel like this is an album that has a better design, has a better structure, better execution, and it feels all around, like I said, more complete. It gives you a much bigger picture and a much better defined picture of what this band is going to be all about, not just considering the past of the band, but also looking towards the future. Now, as far as favorite tracks are concerned, I picked 3 that immediately jump at me. These are my favorite 3 outside of the 2 singles. And I want to start off with In Sinful Secrecy. I love this track. It's driven, but it's not penetrating. The guitars drive the experience, but they're not necessarily cutting through. It uses some melody. This track has some melody that softens the blow. It softens that piercing effect that the guitars could have had. Still a very dirty rock sound, bass line to the way the whole song is put together. The chorus is a little bit more melodic, more hooky, vocally and musically, perhaps more vocally than musically, but you could see those effects existing on both ends. There is some repetition, and the repetition works really well in the chorus, and then having some backing vocals into it helps it even further in order to make the song feel hooky, in order to make the song feel catchy. The solo after the first chorus is face melting. It just rips. It's insanity. That solo is just incredible. After that chorus, you're expecting it to go back into the verses and then maybe have the solo after the second chorus. No, it hits you right after the first chorus. Phenomenal how it's built, phenomenal in terms of how it's executed, and then the song closes off really feeling like a live track. It feels more like a live track than it does a studio track. Next we have more Torment, a song that moves a little bit more methodic, and maybe that's where the torment comes in, because if you move too fast, then you don't really feel tormented, or at least the way you're being tormented is a lot shorter. So I like the fact that this track moves a little bit slower, more methodic. It gains heaviness, it gains power, and allows that torment to last a little bit longer because of the movement that the song has. It's very linear throughout. There's barely any changes as it moves in from the verses into the chorus. There's some slight changes, but very hard to tell. The song really feels flat all the way through. This adds to that torment. It adds to that methodic approach that the track has. It works really well in the context of the album as well, because it helps break the album a little bit. Gives you so you're pumping the brakes ever so slightly when it comes to this track, but then it sets up what comes next, and what comes next is Let There Be Sodomy, my favorite song on this fucking record. I love this track. I couldn't believe that this song wasn't the first single to be released. It rips. It's face melting kind of track. I'm dying to listen to this song live. It's just absolutely phenomenal. The guitars shred from the first minute all the way to the last. It never really loses steam, it never really loses power. The vocals rip all the way through it, almost like they're being dragged by the guitar sound, and they're helping you in terms of guiding your experience all the way through this song. But the song just flies. The chorus is super hooky, so catchy. It's hooky in terms of how it sounds musically, and it's definitely hooky in terms of how the vocal approach comes across. The lyrics also play a huge role in having this chorus be the way that it is. It's just revving. That's how this chorus feels. The chorus doesn't slow down the song, but it feels like the motor is revving. And then once the chorus is finished and you jump into the verses, then it's metal to the pedal, or pedal to the metal I should say, and the track just flies, just moves, just absolutely gains momentum all the way through. I love this dynamic that the song has, because it never really feels like it stops, it never really feels like it breaks, but that chorus definitely is revving the motor. And that sensation, that way of constructing the track makes everything else feel even faster, even more dynamic, even more aggressive, even more punchy. I just love how this song is put together. It's all about the guitars and vocals intertwining with one another and driving the listener all the way through 120 miles an hour. This is it. Midnight Let There Be Witchery, out March 4th on Metal Blade Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, you guys.